This is History for Cocktail Parties with hack historians Thornton Kennedy and James Ottley.
Man, I love that intro music. Charles Bonner did us a huge favor by recording that for us and just sets the tone for History for Cocktail Parties.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charles.
James, you ready to continue our journey to Jekyll Island?
Absolutely. Let's see if we can get there.
So last we spoke, I think we had gotten to the Panic of 1907. So do you want to give us a quick sort of recap on that?
Absolutely. And I want to cover that, and then we can, one or two more things on the lead up to Jekyll, and then we could get to the juicy conspiracy theories. But we'll just, like I said, have a few.
And this has been such a long journey for me that I am drinking whiskey tonight. James is enjoying a Michelob Ultra because he's taking good care of himself.
Right on.
So you will be in better shape at the end of this episode.
Indeed.
I may need a nap.
Indeed. All right, so Panic of 1907, also known as the Knickerbocker Crisis. It was in the fall of 1907. We talked about it was the worst breakdown of the history of the national banking system, to date. Trouble started when a notorious Montana copper magnate, Augustus Hines, took over control of a modest New York financial institution, the Mercantile National Bank. He used the bank to attempt to manipulate a copper mining stock. The stock collapsed, and it put the Mercantile in jeopardy. Depositors withdrew their money. Big trusts and the money trusts come into play at this point. Around this time, trust assets had swelled over the previous decade because of their willingness to pay higher rates of interest and to finance brokers in the stock market. So the trust kind of mimicked the lending and deposit taking of regular banks, but they invested in riskier assets, like lending money to brokers and also in real estate. And they really existed outside of the regulated ecosystem of the regulated, banking system. So again, national banks, they could not lend money, make these unsecured loans to stockbrokers, and the trust provided this extra liquidity. And so all of this money, a lot of the trust money, went into Wall Street. In 1907, more than 40% of all deposits in New York were parked in trust, not banks, and all that money was in the stock market. But in a national bank, you had $1 that was backed by 25 cents of cash in the till, but with trust, there were only 6 cents. So they were a lot riskier.
Didn't have the reserves.
That's exactly right. A lot less protection for a rainy day. The other problem with trust was that they were linked by this interlocking boards and chain of reputation. So the collapse of the Mercantile drew attention to one of its more shady members, a guy named Charles Morse. And Morse sat on boards of 6 other banks, and he controlled 3 other banks. And 2 of these banks were forced to seek assistance from the New York Clearing House. Morse was forced to resign his position, and everybody took a deep breath for just a second. But then he ratted out Charles Barney, who was a central figure in developing the New York subways and was president of the massive Knickerbocker Trust, which was the 3rd largest in New York City. Here again, J.P. Morgan comes into the story, jumps in to save the day.
Well, and to get back into what you were saying about how tightly knit this group was, it was like a club. I mean, they all knew each other. It was a small group that ran all of these banks. They all sat on each other's boards and whatnot. So for J.P. Morgan to call up and pull everybody together was not a big deal. They all knew him. They all knew each other.
Exactly.
And this guy's such a scoundrel. He and his brother, they literally took down the entire U.S. economy by trying to corner the market on copper.
Yeah,
These guys are the Duke brothers from Trading Places.
Good reference. So here again, J.P. Morgan jumps in to save the day, and it shows just how important he was and just how unsophisticated the banking system was that they got to resort to J.P. Morgan to come in and save them. So he assembles a group of bankers to evaluate the worthiness of these troubled banks and to try and shore them up.
Did you hear the story that he was at an Episcopalian conference in Richmond when all of this happened?
No.
Yeah, he was at a conference in Richmond. This all goes down. He cannot come back because the press is watching him. And if he gets on his private car and heads back to New York early, that signals to the American people that the train's off the rails to stay in that lane. So he waited, and he was getting his advisors in his ear. And then as soon as the conference was over, they put his Pullman private car on the train and went back to New York City.
I had not heard that story. That's awesome. So he gets back to New York City. They start evaluating these banks and the Knickerbocker Trust, and he determines that the Knickerbocker Trust has got to fail. It can't be saved. Knickerbocker pays out $8 million, and then that's it. It suspends its operations. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Lehman Brothers in the 2000s.
It's exactly like Lehman. Towards the end of our episode, we'll talk about the difference that the Federal Reserve Bank made after it was formed, and that's one of the things that you'll really see are the similarities between 1907 and 2008.
Yeah, crazy. So you can guess what happened next. There's a stampede on the Trust Company of America, which is the second largest trust, and also other trusts. Morgan approves some short-term loans to the trust company, but it still gets down to $200,000. Panic doesn't stop there. Thursday, October 24th, frightened trusts pull their loans from the stock market, and then that's when it really hits the fan. These trusts, again, were the ones that were financing the stock market. In the end, Morgan and other banks pledged $23.5 million to try and shore up the stock market. Ultimately,
I think John Rockefeller jumped in there as well and pledged a tremendous amount. He told the press that he would give half of his wealth to stop this.
Is that right?
Sliding.
Well, they did what they could. It still ended up being the worst worldwide financial crisis of the 20th century, other than the Great Depression, of course. Talked about a cash shortage last time. All these banks were given IOUs rather than cash. The industrial output fell by 17%. The stock market fell by 48%.
Good Lord.
We're complaining now, but God, 48%?
Honestly.
It's crazy. Takeaway, it was the catalyst or the wake-up call that something had to change. That's when Congress, starts to act after or when there's a crisis. So reform was suddenly the rage. After this, proposals were pouring into Congress, and that's when we see Nelson Aldrich.
Let me tell you a little bit about Nelson Aldrich over here. A quick biographical sketch of Nelson. He was from Rhode Island. He rose up from being a grocer to being the most powerful senator at the time. Came up through the Providence Common Council, so he was a state legislator. Then he was elected to Congress. And then the citizens of Rhode Island elected him to the Senate 2 years later, where he remained for 30 years. He chaired the Committee on Finance from 1898 to 1911. Was an influential expert on the economy, principally associated with defense of protective tariffs and the gold standard, opposition to any meaningful regulation of business. He himself was very wealthy through investments in banking, electricity, gas, rubber, and sugar. Most famously, his daughter married John D. Rockefeller Jr. John Rockefeller, his father, was the wealthiest man in the country. Very close to J.P. Morgan, who was U.S. Steel, and John D. Rockefeller, of course, was Standard Oil.
Right.
So you had two of the biggest companies in the...
He was part of the club.
He was part of the club. And they had a couple great nicknames. Boss Aldrich, Nelson, Admit Nothing, Explain Nothing Aldrich. And President Theodore Roosevelt referred to him as the kingpin of the Republican Party. But there are two passages I want to read. One is from a reporter who wrote a letter. His name was Lincoln Steffens to Teddy Roosevelt. And he wrote, "What I really object to in him is something he probably does honestly out of general conviction. He represents Wall Street, corrupt and corrupting businesses, men and trusts that are forever seeking help, subsidies, and privilege from government." So this guy is in the pocket of big business, unapologetically so.
Right. And he's also the reason we have the term muckraking.
Correct.
That's when that originated. A journalist had written an unflattering article about Aldrich, and TR said that journalist was a muckraker. And that was a reference to Pilgrim's Progress. John Bunyan, not Paul Bunyan, 1678. So Aldrich realizes at a minimum, for political reasons, they got to do something. The Republicans could not face the electorate 1908 without some type of reform policy. So he forms a delegation. They fan out across Europe to study what these European central banks do. I think you had mentioned that they weren't really studying. It was already in his mind that that a central bank is what he wanted to do.
Right. It was just the Aldrich-Vreeland Act.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. So that brings us to and brought him to the Aldrich-Vreeland Act, which passed in May 30th, 1908. The main thing it did was establish a national monetary commission, had 18 members of Congress to study the defects in the system. And you think, they're going to study it. Problem solved, Congress is going to study the problem. It's almost like reminds me of the Reagan quote, I'm with the federal government and I'm here to help. Right. So anyway, before they get any serious progress done and this, study commission, Aldrich gets sidetracked and by a pretty explosive issue, and that is tariffs. They were a big deal then, kind of like they are today. So Republicans, as you mentioned, had always supported high tariffs, but by 1909, the consensus was that tariffs were too high. Funny similarity, right?
Right.
So the progressive wing of the Republican Party, they thought it was a burdensome tax on trade, it was unfair to farmers, and that it tilted the economic trading field in favor of industry, over farmers. President Taft wins the White House in 1908, and one of his first moves, he actually won. He beat William Jennings Bryan. As you mentioned last time, that this poor man ran for president three times and lost three times. So Taft calls on Congress to reduce tariffs. Aldrich is in a delicate spot. He doesn't want to legislate against the interest of his business friends or antagonize his party's progressives. So, he needed to do both, though, to try and get his banking reform done. So I'm sure he's thinking, at this point, what the heck? I'm trying to save the banking system, and now I got to deal with this right now. So they get to work again. Income tax, by the way, is really being pushed at this time. Progressives are hoping that income taxes would help to displace the tariff as a revenue source. It makes the
point that tariffs are what fund the government at this point.
Right. So if they brought in the income tax, maybe that would help reduce tariffs. And Taft supports this idea. So Aldrich reluctantly agrees to Taft's call for a resolution for an income tax amendment, which, by the way, would take three quarters of the states to approve anyway. But on lowering tariffs, he's unwilling to betray his friends and cronies. Comes up in 1909 with the Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act, which lightly reduced some tariffs, but the structure remained pretty much the same. Interestingly, there was a provision for J.P. Morgan in there that there were no tariffs on artwork that was over 20 years. Over 20 years
Very
old.
specific.
Indeed.
It lowered rates on 650 items.
Okay.
It raised rates on 220. So it raised rates on 220, lowered on 650, and made no change to 1,150.
Yeah, it basically was a chance for reform.
But even splitting the baby, a nothing...
A nothing bill. Right. Whole lot of nothing.
Although Taft did say it was the best tariff bill the Republican Party had ever passed.
Well, of course he is. It's his party, So, this marked basically the beginning of a civil war within the Republican Party, and it subjected Aldrich.
That's a great point, yeah.
Yeah, subjected to bitter attacks. So, progressives, if they didn't know already, this really, proved it to them front and center just how much he was in the, back pocket of big business. So it gets better. So the progressives switched from mainly attacking Aldrich on tariffs to also attacking him on what he might be cooking up on banking reform. One Iowa senator said Aldrich's prospective remedy would be a central bank, that dirty word, and this scheme would be intolerable, for it would subject the currency to the authority of a few selfish men and ultimately enslave the financial world. So, also at this time, politicians, they're actively campaigning against the money trust. I mean, they're really catching on that there's a tight grip by Wall Streeters, on the economy. And
it's a smart play, right? The economy just collapsed. Right. You just lost all this wealth. People lost their jobs. You got to strike while the iron's hot.
Got to blame somebody.
Yeah.
And so, they're getting voted into office on that, promising to break the country free from the grip of the money trust. So the litmus test of monetary reform really becomes that any new institution must be free of the taint of Wall Street.
I do not like that word.
I mean, it sounds like just an impossible task at this point. You almost feel sorry for Aldrich at this point.
I do not.
So progressives are battling for control of the party, wielding the shame of the Payne-Aldrich tariff as a cudgel against Aldrich. And Democrats also hate him because he's the old guard. He's in the pocket of big business. Here's Aldrich now. He was once the leader, as you mentioned, of his party, but now he's their biggest liability. Got a quote here. He says, "In another time, Aldrich's plan for a central bank might have neatly fit into the progressive agenda, as it envisioned a central bank, which was an antidote to individualism run amok, an enlightened idea, a progressive idea. But at the moment, nothing proposed by Aldrich would be entertained by his party's liberal wing. I mean, the guy could have cured cancer, and, he still would have been thrown out. So Aldrich intended to wait out the 1910 midterm elections, continue with the Monetary Commission after the fact, and then draft a bill. Republicans, they were weakened by internal strife, and their ability to legislate was in doubt. So he decides to get out of the fishbowl of Washington, D.C. with a small group of trusted bankers. We're not quite there yet.
I'm chomping at the bit.
I know you are. Because anything he did in D.C. would be shot down. I mean, they'd know what he was doing, and it would be over before he started. And so then, not proverbially, but literally, Aldrich gets run over by a trolley.
No.
He's in New York. It's late October. The poor man is 69 years old, and he gets a little confused. He's trying to walk to Park Avenue where his son lives, heading in the wrong direction. He realizes it. Without looking, he turns around and gets hit right there, gets run over, hit by a trolley. It almost killed him.
Now I feel a little bit bad for Nelson Aldrich.
Yeah, at this point. That's another continuing theme. We've got people being run over by trains and trolleys.
History for cocktail parties.
Yes, indeed. And you think, God, what would have happened at this point had he been killed? I mean,
right?
Would we have...
Honestly.
Yeah.
That's a huge twist in American history when you find out what comes out of the next few months.
Midterm elections happen. The Republicans and Taft get a complete shellacking. Democrats win. They win the House. This is the first time in 16 years. The Senate, Democrats gain 12 seats, and that's enough to combine with the Republican insurgents to control it. The entire Congress, is filled with progressives, and they picked up a lot of governorships as well, including Woodrow Wilson in New Jersey, and it really reflected a general upheaval in American society. So Aldrich now, again, poor guy, not only is a hated figure, been run over by a trolley, but now he's powerless, too, has no power. So any hope that the new Congress, in this heat of crusading, would grant Aldrich an unbiased evaluation strictly on the merits is out. I mean, he knew that was a pipe dream. Recovers from his accident, and given his situation now, he's really got to get the hell out of Dodge to get anything done. And he's got to do it on the down low because the team that he's taken with him is we're going to get to that in a minute. Are Wall Street bankers, and everybody does not want the reform to have the taint of Wall Street. So he plans a secret trip, and it's so secret he doesn't even mention it to the National Monetary Commission. Doesn't even mention it. 2 years earlier, a bank president had suggested that maybe he should go do a private trip to Warwick, Rhode Island, but it's cold there, and it's also kind of in the public.
It was in November.
So he decides that they will have this secret meeting and rendezvous in a warmer climate that's where you can't get any more remote. And that place is...
I'm assuming you're talking about Jekyll Island.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
And this is where you really have to go back to like a 90s film noir.
Absolutely.
And you have the train station and you have the middle of the night secrecy. It's just you can't even make it up.
It really is like a movie. I mean, I picture it in my head.
It's so he, under the guise of a duck hunting trip,
right.
Nelson Aldrich, in complete secrecy, invites 5 men to come to Jekyll Island and to write the legislation that would become the Federal Reserve System. He instructs the men to come one at a time to the train terminal.
And the blinds were drawn
in the car.
Were drawn
where they could board his private car in complete secrecy. Aldrich and Henry Davison, who was a senior partner at J.P. Morgan and Company, chose the attendees for their expertise. But Aldrich knew their ties to Wall Street could arouse suspicion about their motives and threaten the bill's political passage. So it really is unbelievable. One reporter wrote, knowledge of who wrote the plan could have influenced people's perception of the value of the ideas, and in all likelihood, it's killed its political passage. So the members of the party, who are they? Who are these men who gather at Jekyll Island? There's Henry Davison, of course, J.P. Morgan. Piatt Andrew, who had been appointed Assistant Treasury Secretary by then. He was an economist and politician, graduate of both Princeton and Harvard, where he was an assistant professor of economics. He published a paper in anticipating the Panic of 1907. And on the strength of that paper, he gets named to the National Monetary Commission. He did not tell his boss, the Treasury Secretary, that he was going on this trip. Frank Vanderlip, president of the National City Bank of New York City, today Citibank.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
From 1909 to 1919, an assistant secretary of the Treasury from 1897 to 1901. He worked in farms and factories until beginning his career in journalism.
All right.
Big plus for journalism. And then he goes to work for the National Bank. When the stock market and financial system collapsed in the Panic of 1907, he worked closely with the stable of bankers led by J.P. Morgan.
Right.
I keep getting back to J.P. Morgan because these men are all in J.P. Morgan's pocket.
And if I can just interject real quick, all of these men I read and the interests that they represented, represented 1/4 of the total wealth in the world.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then Paul Warburg, who you mentioned in our last episode, is really a fascinating character. He's from Germany. He was from a Jewish banking dynasty with origins in Italy, in Venice.
No kidding, really?
Yeah. He marries to New York City to Nina Loeb, the daughter of Salmon and Loeb, the founder of the New York investment firm Kuhn, Loeb & Co. Company. And he drafted a critique of the American banking system, which he thought was insufficiently capitalized. He wrote in the New York Times that the United States is in fact at about the same point that had been reached by Europe at the time of the Medicis and by Asia in all likelihood at the time of Hammurabi.
Is that right?
So the banking system was really behind. The other member was Nelson's personal secretary, a fellow named Shelton. And then a few just hysterical elements. Warburg had never hunted duck in his life, but he goes out to the sporting goods store and buys a duck hunting outfit and gets the gun and everything, and he shows up like he's going to kill
almost
ducks.
Images or shades of Dan Quayle, like not knowing which end of the gun to point.
And then Vanderlip and Davison, these guys all were known as the first name club. That was one of the things they decided to do. They would only use their first names: Nelson, Harry, Frank, Paul, Piat, and Arthur, to prevent staff from learning their identities. But one of the station employees...
Yeah, well, even before that, this mission was so secret, I read that Vanderlip did not even know why he was being called, what they were.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and he asked Warburg, and Warburg said, quote, "It may be a wild goose chase instead of a duck hunt shooting party, and it may be the biggest thing you and I ever did. That all depends on the courage that you and I and the others show." And so it's pretty crazy. There's that secret that one of the guys didn't even know why they were going. But you're right. After a day's journey, they disembark in Brunswick, Georgia, with an ostentatious, showing of their shotguns and whatnot, and loud talk of hunting. By the way, hunting season or duck season in Georgia is November 3rd. And this is right, or at least it is.
24th.
It is now. So they were at least pretty close on that. But yeah, so they get to Brunswick.
Well, let me add one of my favorite little notes here. Vanderlip and Davison went in even further than the first name club. Davison and I, this is Vanderlip writing, adopted even deeper disguises, abandoning our own first names. On the theory that we were always right, we became Wilbur and I became Orville.
Oh, man, they really got into it, didn't they? They knew their roles. They played them well. So they get to Brunswick, and they have a little kind of pucker moment. The station master says, "Now, gentlemen, this is all," he recognized him. He said, "Now, gentlemen, this is all very pretty, but I must tell you that we know who you are, and the reporters are waiting outside." Yeah, I mean, that ranks up there as one of the biggest oh crap moments, in American history. But Davison comes to the rescue, takes the old man by the arm, and walks him off. He said, "Let me tell you a story." And the two left the depot, walked outside, and the station master was never seen or heard from again.
You are kidding.
I am kidding. No. Came back.
You got me.
Yeah. Came back with a twinkle in his eye. He said the station master, he had it under control, that he wasn't going to give him away. And what that story was is lost to history. No one knows. But one way or the other, he convinced him.
Why do you think the media were there? Do you think they were there because Nelson Aldrich was coming?
I just don't know, how they even knew to be there. I mean, I guess somebody had caught wind of it at Penn Station. Yeah. And wired down there, but I don't know. That caught me by surprise.
And the reason they did the Jekyll Island Club was because it was one of the most, if not the most exclusive clubs in the country, which, as a Georgia native, surprises me.
Yeah.
I've been to Jekyll Island.
Yeah, a lot of hunting and fishing.
A lot of hunting and fishing, and a lot of the most powerful men in the country belong to the club, including, drumroll please, J.P. Morgan.
Exactly.
And if you look at the list of attendees, the number of bankers versus the number of government people, the bankers are definitely more represented than the United States government.
I mean, basically one of the reasons that he had to keep it top secret, that he was coming down
Because
there with
the bankers were going to write the rules of banking for the United States of America and not the people who had been elected to do so.
Exactly.
And again, all of these men were in the pocket of J.P. Morgan.
Absolutely.
Not to get conspiratorial.
They were well, we're going to get to the conspiracy in just a minute, or at least what the theory is. I'm not a proponent of it, but so they spent 8 days there, sequestered without even a telegraph or a telephone link. It was J.P. Morgan actually who had arranged for their stay in the actual club, which is of course the Jekyll Island Hotel now that I visited recently. There's a plaque on the door of one of the rooms that says it's the Aldrich Room and the Federal Reserve Room.
I saw that. Yeah, you put that on social media. That was really cool.
Maybe we put it on our new Instagram site. So Morgan had arranged, being the powerful man that he is, for there not to be any other guests or members, staying.
I did not know that. It was completely empty.
It was
during duck hunting season.
Right.
With the no-name club ensconced on Jekyll Island, we'll take a break. And when History for Cocktail Parties comes back, James and I will talk about the results of that fateful meeting. Thank you for listening to History for Cocktail Parties with hack historians James Ottley and Thornton Kennedy. Please like and subscribe, and now that the episode's over, you can go pour yourself another round, and we'll catch you next time.